dual step process of starting live. And we are live. All right, welcome back to another very special episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Demons. I definitely would be inclined to say demonic with what's going around these days without really saying what it is so I don't get shadow banned. I'll let you use your imaginations. Now, as you know, this normally isn't the day I do shows or videos, but for the second week straight, I thought it was important enough to provide you with as much valuable information as you can handle because it's always good for you. Now, today's guest also happens to be a friend for several years. As a matter of fact, as we go down this special power hour, as I'd like to call it, you'll find out through one of the main things that he teaches and owns. I've been a member for longer than I've been involved with this, so I want you folks to keep that in mind because I am advocating for it. So, without further ado, let me introduce my friend, a very successful author, a speaker, a motivational speaker too, owner of Zox Pro, operator of Zox Pro in brain management, and
And
of course, mentor, the one and only Dr. Shannon Panzo, PhD. Dr. Panzo, welcome back.
well, thank you very much, Dr. J, for having me today.
Oh, it's always a pleasure speaking to you down under, which is an interesting place, especially since I've been watching Sky News, which I'm sure you know about that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the
Now,
Sky News is actually quite interesting.
it really is, especially with what's happening here, but I'll leave that for another day. Now, one of the main reasons of having you on right now, aside from having you on periodically to talk about Zox Pro and the benefits of what people can get from that, is also because you have a new book out, Consciousness is Self Awareness. But before we go into those details, let's go back and let's start with your near death experience with that explosion followed by your OBE, also known as out of body experience.
Well, you gave it all away. No surprises left now. Okay. um,
I gave the abbreviated version.
that's okay. I went and I was looking for ways to deal with my own subconscious and learning how to do various things. This happened back in 1985. And I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. Richard Welch. Now, Dr. Richard Welch, he was teaching back in Denver during that time, and I attended his seminar. And I found that by using his methods, I was able to gain control of my subconscious, and I was really starting to take control of those things. And also along the way, it teaches you mental photography, which is the world's most wonderful brain exercise because it's completely natural, and it enables you to use books and other information to gather information at incredible speed and very high clarity, basically using your photographic memory. And so I learned all these wonderful things, and I'm going along about 5 months, 6 months in. And at that particular time, I was actually working at an explosives factory. And at this explosives factory, everything was done by the book. I never went away from that because that's whenever you go away from the book, whenever you're dealing with explosives, that's when accidents happen. So I was always very pedantic at making sure that I was doing everything correctly. Uh, I was working on a machine called an autoloader. Now the autoloader was a prototype machine. It would load zirconium potassium perchlorate into automotive airbag initiators. Okay, so what ended up happening is, well, to give you some basics for zirconium potassium perchlorate, it's an explosive that has 100 times the sensitivity to static electricity than hydrogen gas. So you can imagine how quick this stuff will actually go up if you have any static electricity. So I was doing my regular shift. I was doing my regular gig, loading the parts, cleaning the machine, and before this all happened, I'll take you back a little, about a week before this actually happened. About a week before it happened, I started getting premonitions. One of the things that is great about this system, it enhances everything that you do with your brain. This includes ESP. So you have various talents. These are natural God-given talents that you are already bestowed with. It enhances all these things. So it could be telepathy, telekinesis, precognition, clairvoyance, anything along these lines. You can actually enhance all these things as well. And for me, luckily, the precognition got going for me. So I started having some ill feelings about something going on. Now I couldn't tell if this was me getting run over by a bus or if had to do with the explosive factory or what have you. Now, I did take steps. I I started doing a lot of prayer and meditation.
Hmm.
I invited my guardian angels to watch over me during what was to proceed. I had a feeling that something was going to go down. I did not know what it was. So I'm leaving it to my higher spiritual connections to guide me through whatever it is. And so what ends up happening is I also with the mental, the physical, and the spiritual, I addressed all three of those issues during this time. Now, the physical, instead of having a flame retardant lab coat, I got a flame proof lab coat, of which I still have today with the nice burn mark stamped in the front of it by being hit with a fireball. Um, so yeah, it's still there. The uh, so what ended up happening is instead of me having the squishy little things you put in your ears, I brought in some range muffs from home. So my hearing was a little bit better protected. I did not know if it was going to be a explosive incident or if it's going to be something else. But I
Something that either
figured,
way was causing you anxiety, I would think.
oh, absolutely. You could really feel it. And I told some people around me and my family about it beforehand too. So they said, just do what you can to dissipate that energy. Okay, fine. That's what I set to do. So about 3 o'clock in the morning, when I'm operating this machine, I go and open up the primary barrier to do a clean inspect. We just loaded powder in, so there's a full charge of powder, and I open up the primary barrier, and the machine explodes.
Ouch. To say the least. Literally.
Yeah, I mean, this is all by protocol, that I'm supposed to be doing this. So I open up the primary barrier, the uh, the whole machine explodes. It reduces the machine size from about 4 foot tall down to 2 foot tall. The explosion was so immense that it blew the steel doors off of the room. There's steel doors leading to the outside. It blew them right off the room, uh, right off their hinges. There's uh, people around the facility actually lost their hearing for a while I didn't. The There's so many different things that actually happened at that particular time, but the main thing that happened was I was over in the corner of the room watching it all take place. Now I'm standing there in front of the machine, but at the same time, my spirit is over in the corner of the room watching it take place. So there's my OBE, but this one's different. I still have control over my body. So as I'm watching my body, I tell my body to turn around and go out the other door. There was another door there that led back into the factory area. And so my body turns around, goes out that door. As soon as I'm outside the door, I'm back into safe zone. I snap back into my body. Now, what is very unusual about this is translocation, where I'm in two places at the same time.
Yeah, that's actually, I've never heard that. You're the first person, and I've heard this before, but let me reiterate for everyone out there. And I've spoken to a ton of people, not just on this, which is about close to 700, but throughout life, people who've had OBs. I mean, you're the first to have control of your physical body as well as your uh, I don't know what you'd properly say with the light body, your consciousness, your soul, etc., that you were also in control of. Your other body, your ethereal body.
Right. So, what happened whenever this all took place? Again, there's basically another picture of this as well. The feeling that I got from my body as I'm standing there, the feeling that I got was a warm breeze blew over me. Now, I've talked to professionals. I've talked to the firemen that came in afterwards. They said we have no idea uh, how you got out of this, but you should have been blown in little bits all over the place, and you're here. I walked away from this without a scratch. I was not injured in any way. The only thing that I can suggest is between me and the explosion was my guardian angel protecting me, because there's no other way that this could have happened. Everybody logically said, no, I shouldn't be here talking to you right now. I should be dead. So that's fine. Now, I went outside the room, and once I was outside the room, they had evacuated all the entire complex.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my supervisor came back in to see what was left of me to scrape up, and he turned white as a sheet because he looked at me and he did not know if he was seeing a real person or if he was seeing a ghost, because everybody knew to paint the worst possible picture, for somebody going through this. So no, he was then definitely reassured that I was the real person. Have you ever seen these old comic strips, these old black and white comic strips, where the old miner gets blown up in the mine and he comes out of the mine and the smoke is rolling off of his body?
Yeah, yeah.
That's real. Whenever you get blown up and you're in the middle of it,
Mm-hmm.
the smoke rolls off your body. I found it rather humorous, even at that time, that the smoke was rolling off my body. So these are all the different things that were going on, and because and this is where I tell people, this is how I can say, take control of your life. Whenever you have done what you need to do to precipitate out whatever the events are, whatever comes out on the other side, once the event is done, it's done. So once this event had taken place, I just dusted myself off and kept moving. It didn't bother me. Everybody else would have been going to La La Land.
Do you think this is
It didn't bother
because
me at all.
of the preparation you had prior to, for instance, asking your guides, your spirit guides, to protect you and things like that?
Absolutely.
Now,
But you have to have the insight, and
mhm.
that comes from your intuition, your premonition, that something is happening.
Now,
And then
if
you can take preparation.
if I know timeline correctly, I believe it was 73 that Richard Welch created the photographic memory or his steps for it. Am I right?
Well,
73?
it actually started taking form in 75.
Okay, so 10 years, 75 to 85. Now, had you already gone through his course, what made you acknowledge the clairvoyance and other things that you had right before, when you had this premonition, right before the explosion about a week earlier?
Well, I I don't know how to say it. I started feeling rather uneasy. I started soul searching to see where this feeling was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And the uneasy feeling was that I was in danger. And I did not know the source of the danger, but I was in danger. I could assume that it was around I could assume a little bit that it might be around the explosives, but I wasn't, I did not know the source of the danger. I had to keep an open mind to that. And so whatever was to precipitate out it was going to happen that way. And so at the end of all this, uh, because I was so prepared for the event, I just walked away from it. I could have put 450 people out of work if I had jostled the system and everything else. I didn't feel like doing that. I walked away from this. I was unscathed.
Very, yeah.
I honestly don't believe that there's anybody else that would have survived it, but I survived it. I walked away unscathed. Whenever, I mean, I actually went back to work the same day. No one could stand to be around me because I smelled like burnt metal.
Hmm.
But I went back to work the same day, doing some other things while the company got their people together to debrief me. I walk into the debrief and they're like, "You're telling us that you're not even injured, and this is what happened to you?" Yes. Now I didn't tell them about the OBE, the out of body experience, because I didn't think that they were ready to hear that.
Especially that year, 85, that decade in
Right.
general was not a decade I would discuss UFOs and other things just in general. They were considered foo foo for
so
what some people would call it.
so essentially, what I did is I told them all the details, all the specific details, exactly what happened, and what was distressing to them is that I wasn't dead, okay, or at least seriously injured. They just couldn't get a grip on that, and so I went about my dealings. Now things got a bit strange down there because people gain certain perspectives and start to expect miracles and stuff like that. So I figured, well, it's getting a little bit warmer around here than what I prefer. At that particular moment, there was an opportunity opening up for me to go and work for Richard Welch. And that's where this all started. This is what is called a change. Basically, this is the thing that changes the person's life. Now, me, I got blown up. not,
Literally.
not, not everybody is going to get blown up to make a life change for themselves. And this is what actually happened to me. And this is the reason why I diverted away from being just a worker, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and becoming an integral part of the service. Now, for 17 years, I worked with Richard in the office, and then when we closed up the office, I continued to work with him and collaborate with him after that. And now I'm in charge of pretty much in charge of the company, and that's the way it is.
For those who haven't heard you on here with me or in other interviews, let's describe mental photography or photographic memory. Now, most people, I would presume, would think it's literally exactly what it sounds for, and of course, I know the answer, but you know why I'm asking it.
Okay, let's roll back time a little bit to whenever a person is a child.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever a person is a child, you're born with a eidetic memory.
Perfect.
The eidetic memory is your photographic memory, but it's on all sensory levels. Well, the eidetic memory is a word that does not fit well in a person's mouth. It's difficult to remember. And so people started assigning it a different word to represent the same thing. It's called the photographic memory. You're born with it. You hold on to this ability throughout your life. This is what makes us human. Above everything else, this is how we learn the most, the fastest.
Now, again, so you were already involved with Richard Welch's course, but following the OBE and the explosive is when you fully immerse yourself into being involved into teaching it, right? Is what you said?
Yes, yes.
Now,
Well, I found that this was so important. I mean, it saved my life, but I found that it was so important that I needed to be a part of the teaching of this.
Now let's tie what happened to you and photographic memory slash mental photography. Well, first of all, real quick, would you say there's a difference between those two terms, photographic memory and mental photography?
There, photographic memory is eidetic memory. We just call it photographic memory because it's easier to remember,
Yes.
and that's what's been adopted.
And mental photography?
Mental photography is the use of the photographic memory to take in huge volumes of information. You can use this with books. You can use this with the internet. You can use it with ebooks. Uh, there's an unlimited source of what you can do with the mental photography to use your photographic memory to get all this information into your long-term memory. It'll be there for life, and you just need to learn how to recall it. Now, along the way, you were taught to read. Reading is an opposition of mental photography.
Slows you
So you have
down,
to,
that's for damn sure.
it slows you right on down. This is how we turn our children geniuses into dummies, is we teach them how to read. And we're told by our reading teacher to leave that childlike way of learning behind. Now, this is the childlike way of learning that we have learned so much in our lives. It's just ridiculous to think that we should leave it behind. And yet, that's exactly what's asked of us. Now, whenever we go to school, we should be given a method of learning that will exceed what our photographic memory can do, and instead we're given a way of learning that debilitates the way that we learn and slows us right on down, and we become dumbified because of it.
Now, I'm going to ask a question tying the explosion slash near death experience followed with the OBE along with photographic memory and mental photography. This question is sort of what came first, the chicken or the egg. Because you had premonition and clairvoyant experiences that something was going to happen before the explosion, would you say that the OBE in general helped you expand your memory and learn Richard Welch's methods more so? Or was it the other way around, which you already did say? Was it that because you were already going through Richard Welch's program, is why you were able to hone in on things such as asking your spirit guides and I'm assuming, since you didn't say it, meditation, more so in that period leading up to the explosion?
There, with the mental photography, there is uh, supporting exercises along with the mental photography. It is a synergistic system. They all work together to magnify the results. Now, for 5 or 6 months prior to the actual explosion, I was using all of those processes every day. So whenever the need arose, all of my faculties were already in place. Everything was working for me the way it was supposed to work. So the OBE was simply a result. It was not an intent. So the what happened is, from the mental photography, this great brain exercise, it enables all of your natural attributes to come forward so that you have a lot more functionality as a human being. These are your natural God given gifts that you were given from birth. We have them. We don't typically use them. And I'll give you some examples. Have you heard of this devil's device called a mobile phone?
Ha! Yeah.
It is robbing you of your natural memory because you're not doing the things that it takes to strengthen your memory. And
I'm
that
going
is
to
you have
add
to
to that.
force yourself
Uh,
to
I'm
remember things.
I'm going to so add to that, Dr. Panzo, so much so. Oh my gosh. 20 years ago, I don't care whose phone number it was memorized in my head. Usually, I mean, there were several times I remember through college where a woman I would meet would play a game and say, I'm going to say my number once, you can't write it. And of course, it would just be one of those things that in general was easy for me to store the 7 or the 10-digit number if I had to remember an area code. Now, I find myself only remembering things that I had known for decades or a handful of numbers that I have to memorize. Knock on wood if I ever needed to call someone from jail, which fortunately has never happened. The same time, Dr. Panzo, right? I know I had to add that little twist in there. The same time, I cannot remember more than, say, 20 numbers. Not that I'm sitting here trying to memorize them, but, in the past, it was easier for me to type in someone's number than it was through scroll their contact on the mobile phones I was using. We're talking the late 90s, early 2000s, right? Nowadays, I'll just use Siri and say, call this person, and boom, it's there. So I can totally agree with you with that example and others as well.
Okay. If you take a look at natural Aboriginal cultures, even today, the ones that have held on to their way of doing things usually have not actually dealt with writing. They haven't dealt with things that take take away their presence in the abilities that they have. Quite often, they are telepathic, where they can communicate over vast distances.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often, they have an exceptional memory because they utilize their memory to remember their stories. Their stories go tens of thousands of years into the past, and they're recited exactly the same way then as they are now. This is a lost art. It's definitely a lost art in Western civilization. And the more that we can force ourselves to step away from that phone and memorize our own things, then we're better off for it. We often find that people that take a lot of selfies, unless they're doing it for their own business pursuits, people that take a lot of selfies tend to not be, they tend to use this as a physical record of where they were, because 2 weeks later, you ask them, well, where were you 2 weeks ago? And they can't remember. They have no idea. But they can look up a selfie and they can say, oh yeah, I was doing this back on that day. And so again, these are things that create poor memory. Our system, and you can take this to the bank, our system of government relies upon you forgetting details. That is dangerous,
Yeah,
as we are coming
to
to
say the
find out.
least.
I remember, because of the memory work that I've done, I remember a lot of detail that other people simply have forgotten. And it's scary because I see things. And I teach my clients how to do the same type of thing. I teach people how to gain access to the memory that they should have instead of what what they're left with. And again, these organizations, they want you to forget so that you are not good at saying, "Oh, I know this." There's another thing out there, it's called the Mandela effect.
Ha! Thank you for
You've
bringing it
prob-
up because someone asked about that the other day, and my guest couldn't answer it as much, and neither could I. So please proceed.
the Mandela effect, basically, where this actually came from is Mandela was reported to have died in prison. Then many years later, he actually died out of prison, And so this causes a hole in our memory. Okay, it's basically two truisms. There have been some replacements been done in for instance, The Wizard of Oz. Okay, it's a very common movie. How many people have watched this thing? Probably just about everybody. So it's a commonality. And whenever they replace certain key instruments or symbols in in this particular way, what happens? It creates a hole in our memory, because on our subconscious we know that it's true because this was done this way. But then they're introducing something else into the exact same overlay of the exact same movie where they've changed it. And that hole is actually a back door where you can be hypnotically or subliminally manipulated.
Now, a couple other. Well, another one that I've heard was the Bernstein Bears and the spelling of that. I'm sure you've heard that as well.
Oh, I've heard of that, and I'm not sure if I give it that much credence. But yes, I've heard about that.
The reason why, when this was asked just a handful of days ago, and I personally couldn't answer it aside from give my own opinion, which I refrain from doing, is because of all the examples. I can't say I've ever, like for instance, the Star Wars one. I've never seen Star Wars, so how can I say one versus the other? I sure as heck wasn't the one who owned any of the Bernstein Bears anything, so I couldn't say anything about that either. Nor did I live in South Africa at any period of my life, so I wouldn't have been around with Nelson Mandela. Although I have to say that example of him remembering dying approximately 2.5 to 3 decades earlier is probably the most compelling one that I've heard.
Well, that's why the effect was given his name, is specifically because of that. Now, the point is if you have a populace that believes that, have been led to believe that, then they turn around and find out that it's there's he gets to die again. Well, gee, that's kind of interesting. But it's okay. Well, let's celebrate he's alive, but he's now dead again. Okay, and it just gets put in the background, and because it just gets put in as a like a slip, we don't really think that much of it unless we actually start analyzing what this does. And for the major part of the population, what these slips do, they give you a hole or a crack in your memory. And even if you have a very good memory, you can document both these events. Or if you don't have a good memory, you don't document the event, even though your subconscious still has it in its background. It creates a gap. That gap is a serious defect because it can be used against you. So it's kind of strange that way. But look, let's go ahead and move on. Mental photography. I wanted to talk to you about mental photography a bit. To
Mm-hmm.
give you the stats on mental photography, when you first start using mental photography, it's at 25,000 to 50,000 words per minute. The average reader reads around 250 words per minute. Whenever you mentally photograph information, by the way, the speeds go much higher than that.
Oh yeah,
The,
a
when,
couple
when,
100,000, if not a million. I think it was one of the students that you've had, right? Over a million.
oh yeah, easily. Uh, but whenever you're doing the mental photography, it sends all the information to your long-term memory directly. It bypasses your short-term memory where you have all the problems.
So now we're talking about retention, right?
Retention, right. So you have 100% retention of the information for the rest of your life, whatever you've mentally photographed. But when it comes to reading, you can't claim that with reading.
Yeah, yeah, and it goes down through time too. So I think what is it, 50% in the very short term? Say if you read something last night, is it 50% that the average people would remember the next day?
50% with immediately.
Okay,
But
so a year from
within
now.
48 hours, you've lost 95% of all the information. You're only left with 5% of the information. That then gets transferred to the long-term memory, and you think that you've read something, but you really haven't gotten much out of it.
And I know that 5% a year later is sometimes almost nil, at least through what I've experienced myself, which is why many of us I read the same book or same article, etc., more than once, say a year or several years later. I would agree for the same reason, because it's not retained properly.
Right. And so whenever you're doing the mental photography, it transmits it straight to the long-term memory where you can actually pick it up and use it later. This is excellent for lateral thinking because it enables you to use very detailed information to create new whatever from information you've previously accumulated.
There's a question in the chat if you want to take it real quick before it disappears. Do you want me to read it to you real quick?
Sure.
This is from Statecraft, and let me say hi to Statecraft, who is live in India and a super excellent astrologer who gave me a reading the other day. This is the question, or more of a request. Can you please talk about Aborigines' dream time, please, if you know what that means, because I'm a little lost.
I don't want to step on anybody's toes. If Statecraft wants to have a discussion with me afterwards, I can go into more detail. I have privileged information that way, and thus I do have to honor that. It's not exactly what if I start talking in certain terms. It may sound rather politically incorrect, and I don't want to go there and cause people drama and open up doors that don't need to be opened.
Understandably
So
so, and
so
afterwards,
I can do that after the fact.
yeah, afterwards, Statecraft, if you contact me, I will make sure I put you in touch. Now, Dr. Panzo, I'm going to ask you a question that in 8 years doing this, I have never asked, or when I asked, I couldn't really get the answer other than what people thought it was. So, here goes. Of all the times we talked about consciousness, no one's ever given me the damn definition. So I will ask you, what is consciousness?
Okay. Well, there is no solid actual definition of consciousness. I'll give you more of a relevancy. There's all different sorts of organizations out there that are telling you what you should think of as your consciousness, but it's their version. It's not your version. Everyone should search their own way of looking at consciousness for themselves. And this is an imperative because right now we're faced with a lot of critical decisions as to who we are, what we're doing, and the world around us. And our consciousness plays a big role in that. And if you get to have an understanding of how you believe in your consciousness, then you'll adapt a lot better to your environment, the environment that you're living in. Okay. Now, in my new book, I've approached this book in a very different way. Consciousness is Self-Awareness is the title of the book. Now, this book is actually a workbook. It's not, where most books, they have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have the end. This book is laid out quite a bit differently. It's actually a book for you to take on board and study it. You get the book, you go through, there's only 9 chapters. Each chapter has specific value, and each chapter is meant to make you think about what's going on around you so that you can make your own decisions as to what this all means to you. Now, this will enlighten you by you developing your own perception of what consciousness is for you. And of course, in one book, I couldn't cover all the topics, but the book, uh, Dr. J, you have a copy of the book.
I sure
How did you
do.
find it? How did you find that book?
I would have to say it's, if not, it's probably the best book I've ever read on consciousness. Not just because I read it, but because of the fact of all the exercises in it. And I have to say, is it's the title. I wish you could almost have like every single chapter name in it because you cover so many important topics, which, as we talked about earlier, I'll just throw another one out there that most people may not even consider when you're talking reading a title about consciousness is self-awareness and exercise and self-discovery. You talk about holographic universe, for instance. Again, topics that are very important and very popular with a lot of people that I interact with, especially here. That this book is a must read and a must use. Keep that in mind, folks, when I say use, because it is a workbook as well as something to read.
In other words, I want people. I've actually stipulated this. There's extra space in this book so that you can actually write your notes in the book. And from time to time, you should come back and revisit this book in order to get more out of what that means to you. And you can then update your previous notes as to what you're thinking today instead of yesterday. So there's a lot of use out of this one little book. I made it very easy to read, uh, relatively easy to understand. Some of the things are very in depth. Even the holographic universe. The holographic universe, I deal with three states of consciousness. We have the personal state of consciousness. We have the global state of consciousness. And again, I'm keeping this as simple as I can without elaborating too much. And then we have the universal consciousness. So between those three different forms of consciousness, they all three interact with each other, but they act differently. And we have control over our own personal state of consciousness. We actually do have control over that, but we have to understand that we have control over it. That's your holographic universe. That's your personal holographic universe that you live in at the moment. That's your world. And so we go into we look at the global state of consciousness, which there are certain factions that are impeding our progress globally there. And then there is also the universal consciousness, and this is where we create change from. This is our law of attraction, where that actually works with. So I go through that with the book here as to how to access these and how to understand what that really means to you.
I was gonna say, I what's your take on Akashic records? Because a lot of people, when they hear universal consciousness, they think of the infinite knowledge that we all can access.
Well, the Akashic records are there. Plus, let's say a person dies. There is no loss of energy anywhere in the universe. You have all these memories and all these experiences you build up your entire life. What happens to those? Well, it has been conjectured that those memories actually go out into the universe as energy, and those can be read at a later date.
Now, another, I mean, like, because you covered so many things, again, in just the titles itself, the title, the subtitle, just to give other people an idea, you even included the Philadelphia experiment, which I've only talked about a handful of times, and I'm sure most people know about, which we don't need to go into detail. I just wanted to say it as a yet another topic in this amazing workbook.
Well, I like to look at dealing with magnetics because magnetics literally is an inexhaustible source of energy. And if you actually understand the nature of, well, scientists don't even understand magnetics, but if you take a look at what magnetics mean to us, and of course that's what the Philadelphia experiment was primarily based upon, is shifting magnetics into such a way to make us shifting invisible. But the magnetics is also radiation, so it does have whenever you get into very intense levels of magnetism, you can be causing damage as well. Well, on a lesser level, we have the MRI now, which is, we can scan a person's entire body down to the molecular level simply based on magnetics. It's amazing what you can actually accomplish with this. And this leads to a lot of other different things within our universe. So the Philadelphia experiment was a broadly known experiment that ultimately failed. But at the same time, it did show us just how valuable the knowledge around magnetics actually is.
Let me bring up another amazing thing that you also talk about, just to show the range of things, is ley lines. Can you tell people briefly about ley lines, who I'm sure everyone knows, but just in case, and then how you fit that into the workbook as well?
Well, uh, ley lines are the magnetic lines of force that exist throughout the planet, and they exist beyond the planet as well. But the ley lines themselves, we have an iron core planet, and the iron core is rotating. So this is a magnetic force that it's creating all the time. So the ley lines are just an extension of that massive magnetic force that's being created. It's an engine. So it's going to throw out electromotive force. And so what we have is we have these ley lines that are all over the place. Now, whenever you have ley lines that have, whenever they meet, they cross each other at different angles. The ley line will have its own frequency, its own amplitude, its own amount of energy behind it. And each one of these ley lines have those particular aspects, just like radiation. Some is less dangerous and some is more dangerous. We need to know about these things. I learned about these things at early on, which is good for me because of the area that I live in right now is chocker full of ley lines. So I need to know how to actually move within those so that I'm not, so that we're not creating cancer zones, things like this. Ley lines can create vortexes. Ley lines create doorways to other dimensions. These have been used by adepts for ages, and these are people that use these for teleporting from point to point across the planet. And it's been noteworthy that these things have been going on for thousands of years. That adepts have been using these things.
And also other I don't want to say races, but other non-terrestrial life forms as well.
Well, whenever you open up doorways to other dimensions, you also open up doorways to other life forms and just happenings. Okay, so by understanding the ley lines, you gain a perception of some of the things that you should not do if you want to stay a little bit safer. So there's a lot of information there that has been basically kept out of the light of the average person. And through ignorance is dangerous.
To say the least, for multiple reasons. One, you're not in control of your life, and two, if you're stupefied, then obviously you're easily influenced and therefore controlled.
Right. Okay, so essentially, what I do, what my objective is to teach people how to be the best person that they can be, and how to be more brilliant than they were yesterday, and how that'll make a difference in their life. will allow the person to take better control of their life? Of course it will. Now, there's another aspect as well. Anytime that you are in a situation that you are compelled into fear, okay, for instance, this virus came up and everybody was running around in fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the unknown is probably the worst thing to be fearful of because you can't put a title on what you actually fear. Even if you make up a title and put it on that fear, at least then you've named it. You can start to control it. By controlling your fear, you also decrease stress. Whenever you have an increase in stress, your body actually creates certain enzymes, certain chemicals within your body that actually hurt you whenever you're in stress. So by you decreasing fear, you decrease stress. Whenever you decrease stress, what do? Well, whenever you deal with stress, stress is dis-ease. I'm sure you've heard that before.
Absolutely.
Well, it makes you more susceptible to disease or ailment or the cold or the virus or whatever comes along. You're going to be much more susceptible because you're living your life in fear. If you don't live your life in fear, or at least decrease the amount of fear that you're dealing with, then you're going to decrease the amount of stress you're dealing with. By decreasing the stress, you live more at ease. And you
Stress
live
is a
healthier.
true killer for those of you, I'm sure, who've probably experienced this, but it's been a lot. Topics a lot of covering this. For instance, there was a documentary on Netflix not too long called Happy, and the whole premise about that was that stress is a killer.
Absolutely. So, as a mentor, I make it a personal thing to help my people as much as I can to live a better life. And stress is definitely one of the keynotes amongst all the rest of the good things.
There's a question in here for you. This is from Lasha Senyak. Has Dr. Panzo ever studied Tantric Buddhist philosophies?
Well, tantric, a lot of that has to do with sexual nature as well. I haven't. I've had a lot of Buddhists tell me that my teaching uh, is very familiar to their teaching. In other words, a lot of the same things that I am talking about is held in high esteem in the Buddhist community.
Let me ask you. This is also from Lasha, talking about the Earth's core. She has a statement here that it's not an iron core. She says it's liquid crystal. Do you agree with that or disagree?
Well, if you take a look at metallurgy, you'll find that iron and the shapes that it can attain, and also you're always going to have other things such as silicon, which is a natural lubricant, which silicon dioxide, of course, is quartz crystal. You're going to have that. You're going to have iron, which is a very heavy component, and it will be liquefied, but it will be a mixture to at least to some degree. And yes, these are the components that actually, now silicon is a lot lighter than iron. Gravity wise, you'll find that there's going to be changes in various levels as to what you see, in the actual mix. But if you take a look metallurgically, if you take a look at basically a sliver of metal under a high-powered magnifying glass, you'll see that it has crystalline structure to it. So what she's saying isn't exactly non-true, but it's just a different perception.
This question is from Mike and Crystal Bartham. What about the hollow earth theory?
Well, I know a lot of people have lost their lives in trying to reveal that to the general public. So I don't think I really want to go there too much. I'm not a big expert in it. I've seen enough to see that there are plenty of reasons to believe that way, and I would say that I'm open to that belief that it probably does exist. But in the meantime, uh, I'm firmly planted on this surface, so I think there's plenty for me to deal with while I'm still here on this surface without dealing too much with the hollow earth at this moment.
With you being a mentor through Zox Pro, because when you were talking about photographic memory or idyllic memory, especially as we are younger before we enter school, which slows us down, would you say, because I know the answer to this, but I want everyone to hear this, that Zox Pro has no minimum age?
I would say ZoxPro doesn't really have a minimum age, but due to certain structures within the program, I would say that 7 is probably the minimum starting age for that. But if an adult wants to teach your child under the age of 7, then they should learn it for themselves and then redistribute that knowledge to the child as the child is growing.
One great thing that you offer everyone to go to zoxpro.com, uh, just to look through this site, is Einstein's distraction method. Now, without revealing that, so people obviously can check out Zox Pro, I could tell people that it's greatly benefited me. Again, without revealing the method, can you tell people what that is?
Well, essentially, whenever you go to school, most schools do not teach you how to concentrate. Concentration is a big skill that is really good for you. And that's exactly what this teaches you. Einstein discovered this when he was a teenager, and he used it throughout his entire life. It was his secret weapon that enabled him to focus for long periods of time, uh, simply on anything he was doing. So whenever you go to the site and you can actually sign and get it. Whenever you get the distraction index, you get the whole exercise right there for free.
I know, and that's one of the great things that I still use to this day. And again, without revealing the method, I could tell people that I started with 17 distractions in 3 minutes and worked my way to 0 in 21. Now, if you could understand how mind blowing that is, it really is. And this is something that you could tangibly track the progress for yourself, and it works for everybody. Again, one of the main reasons that when Dr. Panzo is talking about Zox Pro and photographic memory and mental photography and all the benefits you get through Zox Pro, please understand that when I am advocating for it, it is because I have used it and still use Zox and currently am Zoxing, which is the verb that trademarked by Dr. Panza when doing these methods. Exercises, I guess, is a better way. Now, to
I just want to take a moment. I wanted to tell, I wanted to tell your audience about another freebie that I have, and that is if you go to brainmanagement.com, you'll see a pop-up there. It allows you to get the first chapter of my book on consciousness for free. You can download the first chapter for free.
which, again, I would presume that most people, after they get through that first chapter, will want to know through the rest, and I would hope that they end up getting the book. Now, is your book exclusively through your sites, or is it available in Amazon and other places like that?
Oh, it's available on Amazon. There's other distributors picking it up.
What else can you tell people Well, okay, here, I'll ask you this. Would you say that if people read the book first and then went through Zox, that it would be easier for them to grasp, or is it the other way around, or the third option, they just go hand in hand?
Okay. Uh, I would say that each thing that I create is standalone. A person can go through the a person can go through the book as they are today. Now, one of the things that I do recommend is if a person has already gone through Zoxpro training, to actually mentally photograph the book before you actually read it, because it's going to give you a much better way of getting the information out of the book straight away. It makes it easier to read. So I do recommend that with this book. But the Zoxpro training, it's a training that a person undertakes. You use it on a daily basis, and it's geared to give you results. Okay, if you want to go to a big step up in your personal development, then we should look at the mentorship program that I offer. The mentorship program that I offer is very uh, I don't know how to explain it really. It's great because you get me, the top expert in my field, actually working with you on a day-to-day basis in order for you to get further faster. And a lot of the topics that we don't necessarily discuss in the public will be discussed during those times.
And because of technology, you're able to do this no matter where people are, right?
Of course. We primarily use Skype to do the primarily use Skype because it's free between people. Makes it easy.
Yeah, that and Zoom these days, and I'm sure there are lots of other things that are going to be popping up sooner than later. Now, there is a question here, but it's not about that, but I'll ask it as the last one that's not related to this. And again, if it's something you want to talk to Statecraft directly afterwards, then by all means, I'll put you in touch. But because it's in caps, which is what I ask for people for writing questions, I will read it. Here goes. What is your opinion and experience about Tibetan Book of the Dead by Padma Sambhava?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know everything. And that is not a book I'm familiar with.
Okay, now let's go back to ZoxPro. The two websites that I put in the description for you are zoxpro.com, zoxpro.com, and brainmanagement.com. What else do you think is relevant that needs to be said, aside from plugging in where people can find you, that people should know this round?
Most people right now are operating at a deficit. Most people right now are confused, worried, in fear, operating from that fear. You need a form of stability. You need to be able to take control of your life. You need to take your life back from all these different factions. You need to approach things with intelligence. There's too many. There's a lot of intellectuals out there that actually know what's going on and actually talking about it. But the problem is they're being totally overwhelmed by the din of the masses, the unintelligent masses that are being led by their nose to do all the wrong things. It's up to us as individuals to take control of the one person that you are responsible for, and that's you. And the only way that you can do that is for you to gain brain power within yourself and learn how to use that to be a better person, be better than you are yesterday.
Which should be the goal for every single day, be it better than the day before. And that's really a reasonable goal that everyone should have. And I believe at the very basic level, that's what everyone does have.
Well, I'll show you how to do it. All you got to do is do it.
Now, with that being said, Shannon, is there anything else that you feel relevant before I give you time for a final statement? Which we did plug in the book where people can find it, where people can find you at two different websites. What else do you feel people should know right
Uh, do you have a final question for me? Let's put it that way.
now? Let's see. Let me read in here. No, no, myself, no, no. I got as much as you as I wanted to. I'm looking in the chat right now to see if there's anything relevant about um, this, but no. There's some other things, for instance, kind of going back to Hollow Earth. Well, here's one if you want me to read it to you. This is also from Mike and Crystal Barham. Is a lot of this Earth dead biological giants? Mud Fossil University talks a lot about the evidence he has collected, including DNA professor, I think is PROF. Do you have
And
anything to
this is
say about that?
about and this is about giants.
Uh, yes, biological
Uh,
giants.
okay. Uh, there's plenty of documented evidence, even in religious books all across the world, as to the fact that giants did exist, and there's quite a following of information that way. So, but as if you are following that particular string of information, you also know that anytime that the remains of giants are discovered, quite often the remains are gathered up by government agencies and destroyed and hidden and things like this. So there have been a lot of recent archaeological discoveries on not only giants but also past past human genomes that have been found. The testing and everything has been done in private and secrecy until all the conclusive evidence has been actually discovered, and then those organizations finally come forward and present their findings, so that the governments can't come in and basically interrupt their findings and their work. So they've been having to go underground with a lot of their studies simply to keep the flow of information pure and keep the flow of information going. So there's a lot of issues involved in that. Uh, See, a one world government, uh, if there's too many genomes known in this world, then the one world government is going to have a little bit of a difficulty establishing domain, because people are going to want to know, well, which which race is actually dominant, which race is supposed to be the leaders.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up about the fact that a lot of it is hidden. Michael Cremo showed me an amazing newspaper article right here off the coast of Los Angeles in Catalina Island when I'd say about 100 years ago or so, LA Times, they uncovered a giant that was 10, 11, 12 feet tall, in that range, a few meters. The point is in the museum in Catalina, they have a copy of that newspaper article, yet they took out the picture of the giant in the coffin with the human standing next to their find. So, again, that just adds to the fact
Right.
that there have been. Here's two more questions for you that I have about Zox and Zoxing and things like that in general. I didn't ask you the relevance of meditation because it is a huge integral part. For those who don't know why meditation is important for consciousness, for accessing Akashic records, to the three different types of consciousness you mentioned, why is meditation so important to us?
On the short, it connects you to your higher self. Your higher self is connected to the rest of the universe or God, depends on how you look at it. By you accessing you can only do it through a meditative service where you're in hemispheric balance. And whenever you do that, you're connecting yourself with Source, the universe, God, however you want to say it, And this is what enables you to reach our goals.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is the ability for all of us to heal ourselves. You talked about earlier about decreasing stress, which stress puts you in dis-ease, and hence, of course, by decreasing the stress and putting yourself back at ease, you are by default healing yourself. But let's talk about things that, say, for instance, people feel to be permanent. Neuropathy. Let's tackle that, for instance. Is it possible to heal yourself through an ailment like that?
Okay, first thing is knowledge is power. The more knowledge you gain, the more power you have to find solutions. If you have no knowledge, you can't find solutions. The things that are in Western medicine aren't necessarily the things that are going to be the best when it comes to a particular level of neuropathy. Also, there are devices out there that are considered illegal to use that are actually very well used devices simply because somebody in the medical profession has said, this puts our occupation at risk, so we're going to make this device illegal. And it's carried forward as a, basically I've actually seen people that have had various types of devices that are supposed to make you healthier and have proven track records of doing so, but because they're illegal, you stand the chance of running afoul of the law by having them or using them. So, what's more important? Being healthy or following everything. Well, that's a decision each and every person has to make.
I choose
So
healthy.
there's a lot of questions out there regarding those types of things. And again, knowledge is power. Your knowledge of these things and your reach of that knowledge is going to give you more options as to how you procure your health.
Now, there is one more question in the chat, but it's going to open up a whole new door, and I will ask it. But I would say that if we had a chance to stop, I couldn't think of a better place. But since there is one more, I will take this last one for you, and I'll let you decide if it's something you want to take now or in the future. This is from Lasha Senyak. What is the purpose of being physical?
I'll take that at a later date.
Okay.
we're
Okay.
discuss we're discussing we're discussing brain and mental and everything else. There is a trilogy. There is a 3 points that you have to deal with on everything. Whether it no matter what you do, there's 3 points that you have to deal with: the mental, the spiritual, and the physical. So abide by those things, and it'll help you.
With that being said, Dr. Panzo, hang by for a quick moment so I can thank you again off here, but I will thank you on air, or should I say during the vlog, as we are now through MP4s. MP3s are so the past these days. Let me say a couple things. I did promise you that I will finish the last 2 documentaries for you fine folks. I just want to know when. Now, instead of writing your answer while we're live, wait till afterwards, write it anywhere in YouTube, and it'll come to me through a notification or through my new very empty Twitter, but it is there, which is at Dr. J Radio Live New, NEW, because I have been shadow banned, which is a shame because it's no longer the same name for everything else. There's also a really cool UFO footage video I have for you, courtesy of my friends Blake and Brent Cousins at Third Phase of Moon, also my mentors, which I still have yet to release, although it's there, but I want to release it along with my opinion and comments, which I will get to soon. With that being said, the best thing I could say for you is on YouTube, just make sure you hit those notifications, because if you notice, I am not the most I guess you could say on time. I changed times to accommodate my guests, especially since some are not in the United States and others who are can only be on for a specific time. For instance, Dr. Michio Kaku this past Thursday, he was not available 8 p.m. Eastern, but he was available at 2 p.m. Eastern, which is why I had to do it in the morning. So with that being said, folks, thank you all. And now I'm going to go back to my guest, Dr. Shannon Panzo. And Dr. Panzo, if you have one thing to say to anybody, whatever it is, what would it be?
Well, the best thing that you can do for yourself is exercise your brain. Through your brain, everything else takes place. You get that in order, and you'll be a much better person. And you'll be able to do a lot more things.
And again, everybody, please check out Dr. Panzo's book, Consciousness is Self-Awareness, an exercise in self-discovery. Also in the description of this video, you can click on zoxpro.com or brainmanagement.com for more information. Make sure you go get that free download of the first chapter so you can get sucked into the rest of the workbook. Again, not just book, workbook. And please be sure to check out Einstein's distraction method. I promise you it'll change your life. All of ZoxPro will change your life. And if you do enroll in the course, especially into the mentor program, all I could tell you folks is keep at it. It does take some work, but once you start to unlock that part of your brain, I promise you it will be so worth it, and it's something that will stay for your life. With that being said, Dr. Panzo and I are officially signing off. Just pay attention to here and to the updated website, which will be launched in a handful of days after I have to knock out the final step. But really, YouTube is the most important place to pay attention. All right, now we are signing off.